As everybody has seen, Everton Football Club have been deducted 10 points. They are going to appeal this. And so far, I've read 3 different newspaper stories on this. And essentially, they've lost around £126 million. And that means they're in breach of FFP or financial sustainability laws within the Premier League. As far as I've read, Everton have not, it's not been because of offshore accounts, siphoning money, fake sponsors, paying agent fees away from the club or anything like this. It's purely been for Everton have overcommitted. They've overspent. They did not get the results they expected via that spending. They thought Europa League, Champions League, potentially they would gain bigger sponsors and they'd recoup that money. And essentially their plan has failed. They've lost £126 million and they've been deducted 10 points. So there's a fundamental difference between what's happened to them and what could potentially happen to Chelsea, who are currently under a thorough investigation for over a decade's worth of financial irregularities that they've reported for themselves. And of course, we know City have been charged with 115 individual charges. A lot of them are related to financial doping, potential fake sponsors, and also offshore accounts siphoning money. Therefore, circumventing losing money in the same way Everton have obviously been found guilty of today, or deducted points off today. And I think it's eye-opening for a German chicken when he says, Terry, you're talking bullshit. I'm not talking bullshit. Everything that Everton have done is what they've done.
Fans are just going to be triggered this whole
I'm saying this now. I'm going by a report that's come out today from a football financial expert who states that if Chelsea and City are found guilty of their financial irregularities, the punishment could be more severe than Everton's because it's multiple charges, and it isn't breaching the FFP regulations about how much money you can lose. It's cheating to not breach them, which should be deemed as a much bigger crime, as it were. And his theory is if Chelsea and City are found guilty, based on the precedent set of 10 points laid at Everton, City and Chelsea could potentially have such a large points deduction that it leads to them being relegated from the Premier League. And I wanted to get your take on this because obviously we don't cover Everton per se because they're not a top 6 side, and that is what we focus on the Terrace. But when you look at how they have been punished purely for making too big a losses, do you think it's plausible that the big boys like Chelsea and City, if found guilty in their tribunals or through their investigations, should face much heftier punishments than Everton?
Yes, they should face much heftier what's it called? Basically punishments than Everton. I think with Manchester City, listen, the City fans are going to get rattled. They're going to get triggered. That's their problem. Chicken wing is already triggered. All the City fans are going to be angry. This is the reality about their club. They spent money to get to their level. They spent money that they did not have, that they did not make to get to the level that they got to. And we've explained this before in terms of financing in the Middle East, in terms of, kind of how things happen in the Gulf, the fact that there are no quote unquote private companies. There is no such thing as a private company. It's all owned by the government. So essentially, the football terrace is basically sponsoring the Terry restaurant and the Terry chocolate shop and the Terry this and the Terry that. And we can't keep sitting up here and acting like they're all different companies when they all have the same owner. The same owner is Terry Fluer. The same owner for Manchester City is the Abu Dhabi government. And this is the unfortunate reality for Manchester City fans. You can sit up here and you can cry all you want. The reality is the 115 charges, by the way, some of them are like the grass is too long. Some of them are not that deep. But when we're talking about the financial ones, when we're talking about the financial doping ones, when we're talking about the fake sponsors, when we're talking about mailboxes printing money, when we're talking about you're basically getting sponsored hundreds of millions by the same people that own the football club, it's essentially a breach. And it's just logically that's what it implies. With Chelsea, I think because essentially I think they're allowing basically the Premier League, it's open sourcing type of thing. Because they're allowing the Premier League and the people who can actually give them punishments to get access to information, the punishment is going to be, I think, a bit than Manchester City. And the reality is, if Everton's punishment for this kind of for this break of the rule is is basically 10 points deduction. Then what's 115 charges gonna get? That's gonna be that's absolutely insane.
It is, and we're going to come to City in a minute. I wanted to go to a comment that came through that says a breach is a breach. That isn't true football matters. So you've got to read into it. So again, new information may come out and it would change my mind. But on the 3 articles I've read regarding Everton's point deduction and their breach, they haven't cheated the system. So they haven't been caught, for instance, paying tens of millions of pounds a season to agents or to clubs via offshore businesses and like bank accounts that circumvent their trading accounts at Everton. What they've essentially done is they've made a lot. They've made too many losses. They've made 120 over 3 years. They've lost 124 million, and that's too big a loss. They must be punished for it because under what they call the breaching profit and sustainability rules in the Premier League, they've lost too much money. So that isn't cheating. That's being run poorly. But they've lost it in an honest way, I suppose. Does that make sense? They've invested thinking that we'd yield better results, which would bring in more income, which would give us so we don't lose. It hasn't gone right. The situation with Chelsea and City is very different. They are accused of cheating. They are accused of bending the rules. They are accused of using payment mechanisms, and in City's case, potentially fake sponsorships to generate the income so they don't breach the profit and sustainability rules. So there's a fundamental difference between what happened to what Everton did versus what Chelsea are accused of and what Manchester City have been charged with as it stands. When it comes to Chelsea, though, again,
with Everton, I just want to say something
just
quickly on the Everton thing, because as you said, sometimes we don't really cover the clubs that aren't really big six like that. With Everton, they only have themselves to blame, and I'll tell you why Everton only have themselves to blame. Transfer strategy, absolute. With all due respect, I'm going to say this: if there's an Everton fan watching, he'd probably agree with me if he just takes away the fact that I support Liverpool Football Club. The absolute worst transfer strategy in the Premier League out of any club in the last 10 years. The absolute worst by far. But essentially what Everton done is signing rejects from big clubs on high contracts. And you can, by the way, the list goes on and on and on. Michael Keane, Theo Walcott, their whole team is essentially a bunch of washed up rejects from the big six clubs on high wages. And also they paid hefty prices for so many of them. I swear they signed Iwobi for like 40 million. I could be mistaken. I think they signed Richarlison for 50 million from Watford. Like all the decisions that they made led into, without of course them getting Champions League football, without them winning trophies, without them being competitive, it led to that stage. So Everton have themselves to blame, because if you don't have a transfer strategy and you're kind of gung-ho all over the place, this is what happens. But yeah, that's my thoughts on the Everton side.
No, of course, and which is why it appears, and it's only how it appears, that potentially the Chelseas and the Cities have circumvented. So their way of spending is, well, we'll spend, but we'll do it in a way where, yes, we'll put the transfer fee through the club. But you know what? We've got 5 million here and 20 million here and 15 million there for agents. We're going to pay that. We'll get the owner to transfer that money when actually the money should come from the football club. Now, there's no legal charge here. They've not broken any laws, but it's about the rules of engagement surrounding how they play. But I think what you said earlier about Chelsea is very key. And this is where, again, I've read the article and actually put the article up on part of the article up here as people can see. This comes from a legal expert, Stefan Brawson, who used to work, by the way, for Manchester City. So he has come out and said that Chelsea and City look set for relegation if found guilty of their FFP breaches. Warns ex-financial advisor to the current champ. So this isn't coming from some Joe Nobody across social media. This is coming from somebody that's a legal expert, a financial expert who worked for Manchester City, that understands the inner goings on surrounding this. And the articles, there's multiple out there, well worth reading and delving into. But with Chelsea, the fundamental difference with them, where I don't think their punishment, I still think they're going to get a punishment. And I actually think they will end up getting a points deduction. I really do. The reason this is, I think Chelsea's new owners have found all of this. And there's an element of, we are better off when we're already in the mire. They're better off reporting it now and taking their punishment now. Say it's 10 points, 15 points, 20 point deduction. They're probably not going to make the Champions League this season anyway.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to win enough points to not get relegated, most likely. So they're probably thinking, if we take our punishment now, yes, we'll have another poor season coming stupid, 15th, 16th maybe because of a points deduction. But then it's done, it's out of the way, we go again next year. As opposed to you don't really want to be back in title races. And then suddenly you get a 20 points deduction.
Yeah, because Chelsea aren't really competing for anything this season.
No,
like Chelsea are just building. Chelsea got Pochettino. Me and you spoke about Pochettino from the summer. We said, look, it's essentially the right manager for this current time, the wrong fan base. Now, if this FFP breach happens and essentially they get charged this season, exactly what Terry just said, if they get charged this season, it wouldn't mean anything in terms of long-term future, because this season, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't mean anything. That's the thing. So in the grand scheme of things, the only small caveat I would question is, and I'm sure Terry's heard it before, did we not hear even from Chelsea fans that they need to apparently make Champions League football this season in order for them to reach FFP?
They kind of do and they don't, though, because they're just gone. I swear I've read their owners have just gone and got another £500 million of investment that's come into the football club. So I honestly think Chelsea are going to be okay in that regard. But at the end of the day, it's one of those things where it's interesting though, because this week the additional stories about Chelsea came out, and these ones were because of leaks. And generally these leaks, by the way, same as Man City's, it isn't some geek hacker in his bedroom has hacked into their computer systems. The same as Man City's leak that revealed all their emails. It's an ex-employee that still had access to the emails. So you can call it a leak and make it sound like some conspiratorial movie, but it isn't. It's an ex-employee. If an employee of the current government brought you some emails from Boris Johnson that were really bad, we wouldn't all go, no, it can't be true. It's an illegal hacking. We don't want to hear about it. We'd go, it's an ex-employee. We know it's genuine. So it's funny, this week's stories about Chelsea that have come out are an external investigation that Chelsea didn't know about, or they're saying they didn't know about. My theory is Chelsea know that The Guardian and some international newspapers are investigating them for these breaches in history. And what Chelsea are doing is smart. They're getting ahead of the game. They're reporting themselves for things they've done wrong, and they're cooperating. They're giving the Premier League full access to their computer systems, emails, bank accounts. They're reporting themselves. And they're doing it because I think their theory is the Premier League have issued so many charges against City because Man City are not cooperating. Man City, and by the way, they've got a legal right not to cooperate. I'm not saying they have to. They've said, no, we're not giving you more access to our emails. We're not letting you go through and corroborate these stories. My view is, if you've got, this isn't a criminal matter, no one's going to prison. If you haven't done anything wrong and there's nothing to worry about, show the Premier League their fake emails, give them access to your servers, and then we'll know, right? Then you could have put this to bed years ago, but you haven't. So of course it's a different scenario, and I think Chelsea are being clever. They're going to work with the Premier League, and I think they'll get found guilty. I think they'll get a points deduction and a heavy fine, but I think it'll be reduced in some way, because one, although it's still Chelsea Football Club, it isn't the current people running it that have broke those laws and rules. Does that make sense? Plus they're cooperating, and like in any circumstance, whether it's civil, business related, corporate related, or criminally related, when you help, when you support the courts, when you support the governing body, when you support the authority, in this case, the Premier League, they always give you a lighter sentence. If you get arrested today because you've robbed the post office, but you admit your guilt, you put your hands up, you save the country the cost of a trial, you get less time in prison typically than someone that says not guilty, that doesn't cooperate, that says no comment in your interview. That's not me giving anybody any legal advice. Just do whatever you feels best. I'm just saying you typically get a lesser punishment. So I think Chelsea are going to do it that way. But what I really see a lot of is, like, City fans get very triggered and very angry when these conversations come up. I do get it. I understand City fans are very, very fearful of being found guilty in this tribunal. I think they are very, very worried about how big a points deduction they could get, relegations, transfer restraints. There's all talk that they could get massive points reductions, be thrown out the Premier League. They could be banned from transfers for 2 or 3 years. They could even potentially have their title stripped. And if they don't have their title stripped, you know as well as I do, they're proven to have cheated and built this foundation of brilliance on cheating the system. It doesn't matter what they've achieved and won. Their fans can celebrate it. Their fans can still remember it and be joyous. But I think about 80% of their fans will go, it doesn't even feel like a trophy anymore because we cheated to get there. And I don't think football will recognize it. I think we'll all look at it and go, I don't even recognize that Champions League. I don't recognize that Premier League. I don't recognize that 100 points because you did it off the base of cheating. And I've always said all along, I get City fans' anger. I get their frustration. And I will genuinely feel sorry for City fans. The average City fan I feel sorry for because they haven't cheated. They haven't done anything wrong. They've just supported their club. I don't even think the managers and the players are aware of all of this. So I will feel sorry for Pep, having a huge part of his legacy taken away here. But when I look at Everton, who haven't cheated, they have just been run poorly and they've breached one of the rules. I've had a 10-point deduction. If Man City are found guilty, as far as I'm concerned, and this comment says here, if City only get a 30 points deduction, that would be an absolute piss take, would confirm it's rigged. I would look at it and say, if they've cheated to circumvent this and their punishment isn't exponentially worse than Everton's, then I do think there's a major problem here. The precedent that sets for me is we might as well all overspend. And instead of losing money like Everton, we might as well all cheat because one, we might not get caught. And two, if we do get caught, the punishment's less than actually just being poorly run anyway. So they cannot set a precedent that cheating gets you less of a punishment than making a mistake, being run poorly, or having a strategy that didn't work. Because when you're failing a strategy like Everton have done, that's not done with any malice. That's not done with it's not done in a way where you're trying to hoodwink people. It's an honest mistake. When you go out of your way to cheat, that is a premeditated action. So the Premier League here, they have to make a stance. Otherwise, you are essentially saying you are setting a precedent and you are drawing a line in the ground, that says everyone can cheat. They have to be very careful about it.